Hello everybody, today I'll be talking about 5 noteworthy makeup releases that launched this summer. We're going to be talking about the products themselves, their release, and how it fits in to where makeup is going, the current makeup trends, all of that jazz. I feel like this is a fun video to do because you guys know how much I love talking about makeup and new makeup and just makeup in general. I mean, I have a channel dedicated to that, of course, but I also feel like it's super important to analyze makeup releases after the fact, because what a lot of us don't actually think about whenever it comes to makeup is buying not for the trends but for longevity. For instance, whenever you're buying a luxury fashion item, everybody always talks about making sure that that item is going to add value to your collection, making sure that that item is going to last you past one season, and I think that that same kind of thought process should be applied to purchasing makeup. Sure, makeup does have an expiration date, but I think it's important that whenever we spend money on an item, we think about how it adds value, we think about whether or not it's going to be only in for a season or not, and we think about how long we'll actually be using this item. This is all part of my goal to save money on makeup, make sure that we are using what we own in our collections, and we're able to find joy in just like opening up our makeup collection and picking out a product. So I'll be talking about these 5 makeup releases, and I am going to sort these out based on when these makeup releases were announced. So I'm going to start in June and I'm going to end in August. So the first makeup release I want to talk about is the Jeffree Star Jawbreaker and Jawbreaker Mini palette. This was a collection that launched June 7th, or that was announced June 7th on Trend Mood, and I think that this holds a great deal of significance because this speaks to, I would say, the tendencies of brands these days to release really large palettes. However, what was really interesting to me was that Jeffree Star provided 2 options. Jeffree Star decided to release a rather large palette filled with different colors. However, he also released a smaller 9-pan palette as well that had a few colors in it but a few neutrals as well. I really feel like Jeffree Star spoke to a great many people who were both interested in the larger palette trend but also wanted to just buy the smaller palettes as well, because I really feel like as we look at the larger makeup community right now, a lot of people still really love large palettes, and that's where a lot of makeup is going. However, a lot of other people, myself included, really like the smaller, more compact, more, I would say, edited versions of palettes as well. A lot of us don't want gigantic palettes, and Jeffree Star Cosmetics definitely seemed to realize this, and as a result, you had 2 palettes. I, for one, was excited about this release. I did not partake in it, as many of you already know, because I was on my no-buy for this past summer, but I did really appreciate how colorful these releases were and how bright and how vivid they were, because what happens whenever like a prominent brand releases a colorful palette, I feel like it takes us one step closer to ensuring that a lot of people feel really comfortable wearing colorful makeup. I, for one, love colorful makeup, and I really want to spread that love around, I guess, by encouraging others to not just limit themselves by just wearing neutrals, but to also inject a little bit of color into their lives as well. And I really feel like this Jeffree Star Jawbreaker palette did just that. However, I do want to say that the hype around this release died out really quickly. I only see a handful of creators posting new tutorials or mentioning either of these palettes in their videos anymore, but when this collection first came out, these 2 palettes were definitely talked about a lot. However, now the hype has died down quite a bit. I feel like that's important to note. The next thing I'm going to mention is the ColourPop Honey palette. This was a highly anticipated, very much hyped up palette, and it was launched or announced on June 26th, and it instantly sparked a lot of conversation about yellow shadows. I definitely feel like this palette was in no way, shape, or form the very first mention of yellow that we saw, because previous to this we have seen yellow become more and more of a, I would say, mainstay in the makeup community as more and more brands experiment with yellow shadows. And when ColourPop started doing their monochromatic palette series, a lot of people were super interested in seeing a yellow palette, myself included. You guys saw that I did do my redesign on this palette, and I changed it up a little bit. Most notably, I did remove that pressed glitter that was in the center. I still don't see why they included that pressed glitter in the center of the palette if it isn't even eye safe. I don't really get that. But the rest of the palette is very vibrant, very yellow. I am very happy that they released this palette because I feel like this is a palette that people still have conversations about. It's not necessarily as hyped up as it was when it first released, but people still talk about it as being one of their favorite palettes, and people still team it with other palettes as well. So in my personal opinion, I feel like the ColourPop Honey palette, it was one of the first palettes released by a more mainstream brand that happened to be completely monochromatically yellow. And I think because of that, this palette has longevity, more so than, say, the Jeffree Star Jawbreaker collection would, because while colorful palettes aren't nearly as common as neutral palettes these days, we still see a lot of colorful palettes and or rainbow palettes launched all the time. So Jeffree Star's take on it wasn't that unique in my opinion. It was pretty, but it wasn't like the most unique thing ever. However, the ColourPop Honey palette was a little bit more unique, therefore I do feel like the ColourPop Honey palette has potential to have a lot more longevity than, say, other rainbow palette releases. Next, I want to talk about House Laboratories, which was announced on July 11th. This is the makeup line created by Lady Gaga, and this was immediately something that everybody found themselves talking about. Lady Gaga basically announced House Laboratories, and she announced it with a little bit of a sneak peek into the first, I would say, round of products that she was going to be releasing. She has some lip glosses, she has some lip liners, and then she also has some liquid eyeshadows. However, the reason that I included this launch in this video, and the reason I think it was noteworthy, was because, in my opinion, this was one of the first times that somebody as famous and as, I would say, high profile as Lady Gaga promoted the idea of multi-use in makeup and promoted the idea of self-expression in makeup. She is not the only one to say that makeup can have many uses or to really promote makeup as a significant vehicle to express yourself. However, she's definitely one of the biggest names to say it to date. You have a lot of makeup artists having this kind of mentality. You have a lot of beauty influencers having this kind of mentality. But I don't think that anybody can really deny how much of a superstar Lady Gaga is. And whenever she says something, it definitely has a certain kind of impact. In terms of trends, I do think that this initial launch really speaks to the glossy kind of trend that we've been seeing a lot. Also, I think it's important to note that so far Lady Gaga has not launched any kind of complexion product. She has decided to stay exclusive to the lips and the eyes so far. But I do think that that speaks volumes about the idea of having less of a filter surrounding cosmetics. If you look at the campaign shots, if you look at the campaign images for the brand, you will notice that there is a great deal of imperfection present in the campaign shots. All of the looks that have been created by the artist, I believe Sarah Tano, who is Lady Gaga's personal makeup artist, were really beautifully imperfect. And of course the images are edited, but if you really zoom in and if you really look closely at the different campaign shots, they look incredibly imperfect, and that is an incredibly significant way of promoting this imperfection tied to makeup. That's something that I've spoken about a lot on this channel. You guys know how much I love really just embracing natural imperfection, really looking at makeup as something fun that can be used in a way that is not too rigid or not too serious, and something that I really do like. And probably one of the things that I like the most about this collection or about this launch is that Lady Gaga has managed to use this as a way of, yes, promoting her brand and I would say conveying her brand and herself to be a unique voice in the industry. But also I like how Lady Gaga used her, I would say, platform to embrace imperfection, which of course, if you're a fan of Lady Gaga, that's something that she's been doing her entire career practically, but it's really great seeing her translate that into makeup. I, for one, am really looking forward to seeing what more Lady Gaga is going to be releasing. I definitely think that it's one of the top makeup releases of 2019 that we've seen so far. Moving on, I really want to speak on the Fenty Beauty Pro Filter Hydrating Longwear Foundation. This was announced on August 1st. This was when we saw that like huge array of shades that were posted on Trendmood, and I believe that that's when everybody really was excited about this launch, because for a while, ever since she launched her first foundation, the foundation had 40 shades, the foundation that like everybody was going berserk over, people have been saying, hey, I have dry skin, hey, this is way too drying for me, can you do a version of this foundation that's luminous? And Rihanna basically was like, okay, yeah, let's just do that. So she launched this hydrating foundation, this foundation that definitely has much more of a luminous and or natural finish than the soft matte foundation. The soft matte foundation, I do own that foundation, and for a while I really liked it. I felt like it worked for my oily skin. However, I also feel like it's important to know that that foundation is quite difficult to blend, and it does have like that very matte kind of look. Yes, it's a soft matte, it's not the most matte I've ever tried, however it is still matte. Rihanna launching a luminous foundation was, in my mind, a really great way to match where the trends are moving, because I've spoken about this again several times on my channel, but I truly feel, and I think a lot of you guys have noticed this as well, I truly feel like the makeup aesthetic or the makeup style of today is slowly moving towards something that is a little bit low maintenance, low coverage, some more healthy looking, dewy looking finishes, maybe a little bit of a glossier kind of finish in all makeup. And this is a significant departure from what we've been seeing several years ago leading up to now, which was a super matte, super full coverage, super high maintenance kind of makeup style. It is slowly becoming more dated to have that kind of makeup, and the newer trends are moving towards, like I said before, a more luminous kind of finish, a more low coverage kind of look, and something that is decidedly more low maintenance. And I definitely feel like Fenty's new foundation truly exemplified this trend. I will say that this is a pretty high coverage foundation nevertheless, so it's not necessarily a lower coverage foundation, it's still a high coverage foundation. However, it does stick, or it does adhere to that slowly but surely moving luminous trend as well. Next, I want to talk about the Anastasia Beverly Hills Norvina Volume 1 palette. This was announced quite recently on August 20th. Now, I'm sure many of you already know this, but Anastasia Beverly Hills, recently they have been releasing a ton of stuff, and some people are feeling some type of way about it. A lot of people seem to think that since Anastasia is releasing so much makeup so quickly, it's becoming a little bit overwhelming. I, for one, I don't really consider myself like a die-hard fan of Anastasia Beverly Hills. I mean, I like the brand, but I don't like love their brand. I mean, I kind of do, but like I really feel really indifferent towards the situation. But I did notice that it was kind of difficult to pick like one noteworthy release from Anastasia Beverly Hills, because virtually anything that they release, people talk about it all the time. I do think that it's important to talk about this Norvina Volume 1 palette, because there's so much that we can go into with this palette. Number one, this palette does adhere to the more colorful trends, and it takes fall kind of makeup. It takes fall tones and it spins them around to still stick to the more colorful kind of trends that are, I would say, becoming more and more common. I really do like the colors individually in this palette. However, I will say that this palette is rather large. and a lot of people felt the same way. In fact, I did do a redesign of this palette. Aren't you guys sick of me saying that? But I did do a redesign of this palette. What ended up happening was I decreased the number of shades, and I basically made this into a more, I would say, edited version of a palette, and I just included some of the pinks, purples, and blues, and that's it. But I will say that a lot of people really do seem to like this palette. The formula, I've never tried the formula, okay, I've never bought this palette, I've never even swatched it, but I will say that from what I have seen people say, the formula seems to be pretty great, the colors are really vibrant, and yes, this is another colorful makeup release that in my mind is encouraging people to use more colorful makeup, which I am living for. However, one of the caveats in my opinion that have to do with this release is the fact that this palette is ginormous. It is large, it is big, and the color story seems to be a little bit haphazard. Something that I want to apply to Anastasia Beverly Hills, maybe even Jeffree Star Cosmetics, something that's kind of unfortunate in my opinion, is that so many brands, large and small, beloved or not, seem to be taking the Morphe train whenever it comes to releasing really large palettes. And see, the thing is, I feel like Morphe started this large palette craze, and because they started such a big large palette craze, people started to sort of become sick of it. And yes, people are still interested in large palettes right now, but I do feel like a large part of the makeup loving population has stepped away from large palettes in favor of something else, or in favor of smaller, more edited palettes. The fact that this Norvina palette was announced on August 20th and it is so large and it is so overwhelming, and there doesn't necessarily seem to be much rhyme or reason to it, I feel like that's Anastasia Beverly Hills sort of going off trend a little bit, because yes, the trend right now, it is colorful palettes, but I definitely do feel like more and more people are veering towards smaller, more edited palettes. When Jeffree Star Cosmetics released their Jawbreaker palettes, that was at the beginning of the summer. Yes, people were still interested in that kind of palette, but now we're talking about, right now it's September, this Anastasia Beverly Hills palette was released in August. I feel like people have sort of gotten a little bit sick of seeing so many large palettes. Is that fact? I don't know. That's just my personal opinion. But I definitely do think of Anastasia Beverly Hills as being a leading makeup brand whenever it comes to setting trends and in a way dictating how makeup is going to go. So they seem to have a good eye for what people want, and they release products accordingly. However, with this large palette, I mean, I don't necessarily see the large palette trend lasting for much longer, because there are only so many large palettes you can have before you start getting a little bit sick and tired of them, in my personal opinion. That's where I'm going to end this video today. Those are the 5 noteworthy makeup releases that I wanted to talk about that launched around this summer in 2019. I really do feel like each and every single one of these releases really spoke to or exemplified certain trends, and I wanted to talk about that. So I really do hope that you guys enjoyed this video and found it interesting. If you have any opinions about any of these makeup releases, or if you think that you can think of any other makeup release that was noteworthy that I did not mention in this video, leave all those thoughts in the comments below and I'll get back to you. But with that, thank you so much for your time today, and I will see you all tomorrow. Bye guys.